You're watching the Scottish Football Zone with all the build-up and reactions. Following Celtic in the Europa Cup.
Not for much longer.
Yeah. There we go. If you've not saw the game yet, I think James has just put the cat in the bag there. But yeah.
Not really. It's a two-legged affair, so, you know.
Exactly. Yeah, the only way is up. Or should that be down?
No, up.
I don't know. Yeah, so final score tonight, Celtic 1, Stuttgart 4. James Elliott has joined us on the show tonight, and I don't know where to start with that performance, James. Yeah, take it away.
As you know, Michael, I didn't see the first half because I was doing my radio show, which finished at 9 p.m. So I really only saw the second half. And to be perfectly honest with you, what I seen of the second half, I'm glad I didn't see the first half. It was really, really awful, really awful. Defensively, we were like school kids.
Yeah, no, exactly. That was men against boys, James, you know. And I was thinking about, like, obviously Celtic can't do that every week, but you go from a kind of disappointment in the first half to come out a high at the end of the game. And watching that, it was like two different performances, but it was basically the same. If you think about the first half performance with again Kamark, and then tonight for the whole 95 minutes.
Yeah, I think what you have to remember as well, of course, is that there's a huge gulf in the class between Kilmarnock, and no disrespect to Kilmarnock and Stuttgart, you know, and Stuttgart really showed Celtic up. Certainly from what I saw in the second half, they really showed Celtic up. I mean, when I heard that it had gone 1-0 and then it had come back to 1-1, I thought, oh, well, you know, maybe there's some light at the end of the tunnel. But then I never saw anything else until I started to watch the second half. And then it was just like downhill all the way, in my opinion.
Graham was saying, obviously we'll get into it, but he says Celtic has a real issue with Michael. He's cost them a lot of goals. Two goals tonight. He's cost Celtic, but he cost them throughout the season. And before people get in with a comment saying, it's Michael's gun, you really have to remember that he's been a brilliant goalkeeper over the years since he came to Celtic.
Yeah, I mean, he's a quality keeper. There's no doubt in that. But I think, and I mentioned this to somebody else on a chat group I was in before I came on air, that for me, I feel that the time has come for him to hang up his gloves. Because let's be honest, you know, every footballer, there comes a point in their career when they themselves should know, do you know what, I'm not doing as well as I should be doing. It's time for me to take a step back. And to be honest, I really like Sinisalo. You know, I just don't think he's getting enough opportunities. And I think if he was to get a run in the team, I doubt if Schmeichel would get back in.
Let's go back to the beginning of the game, James. It was about 4 minutes. That's why there was 4 minutes into the time at the end of the first half. There was another protest again tonight. And I don't think... I would like to get people's views, but also your views as well. I think that's put off the team a wee bit, because obviously, look, listen, I know that there's a situation there between the supporters and the board, right? But you would think like a big knockout game against Stuttgart, Celtic Park, just get behind the team for 90 minutes. But no. And by the way, I think there'll be another fine coming to Celtic's door very soon.
Right. I mean, obviously that was at the beginning of the game, and I never saw it, so I can't really comment as such. But what I would like to say is, yes, the fans have got a right to protest, you know, because the club is not being run particularly well at the moment. So they've got a right. They pay their money. They've got the right to get their voices heard. But it's how you go about protesting. Do you know what I mean? There's a right way and a wrong way to protest. And for me, the Green Brigade are doing it the wrong way. I know it's not just them, and I'm not just placing the blame on them. There's blame to be placed with the board as well. But really, both of them have to stop throwing their toys out the pram, get into a room together, sit down, talk like adults, and work it out for the sake of the team on the park and for the sake of the future of the club.
I think you made a comment to me in the week, James, as well, and I totally agree with you, by the way. I think that this goes beyond football. I mean, there's an issue with Peter Lawwell and some of the fans at the moment as well, and I think the word that you use, James, is, and I've used this for quite a while now. I'm not copying you because you said that, but it's entitled in terms of, like, if the fans if the team doesn't win anything, they throw their toys at the plat. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean that all customers, like, you've got a right to say what's going on at a football club or elsewhere. But I just feel as though that, yeah, there's a time and a place for that. But also, if you want to protest, don't protest in the football stadium. Make your noise outside the front door, because your team is playing a big game.
Yeah. I mean, let's be honest, there's a generation of Celtic supporters who have grown up with nothing but success. They don't really know about the team struggling and the struggles that the team has had in the past. That's a long, long time ago to them, you know. And there has always been a certain amount of protest at Celtic when things have gone wrong, but the protests have never really been in the stadium, as you said. The protests have been done out with the stadium. Now, whether or not the protests inside the stadium has an effect on the players, I can't really say. I know that they will say, no, it doesn't affect them. But personally, I think it must have some kind of effect. Because if you're used to, on a big European night, like a full house Celtic Park, screaming and shouting for you to succeed and get forward and score goals, it must lift you. And if you're playing a big European game and it's, relatively speaking, quiet, then it must pull you down a little bit. Surely it must do.
Yeah, and because that was because it was a 4 minutes of injury time, the end of the first half. Now, you never saw the protest, that the cameras took you away from it, you know. But apparently there was, like, balls thrown onto the park, and I think it was the same as what was it, Dundee earlier in the season or last season?
Dundee United, I think it was.
Dundee United as well. But yeah, I mean, I suppose we can leave the protest there, because this is a kind of like football show, but you don't want to see any of that kind of like divide between the fans and the fans and the board and all that. They should be pulling together in a kind of big European night as well.
Absolutely. And as I said, I mean, they have a right to protest. Everybody has a right to protest. But when they start attacking personally individuals or dragging their families into it, then I'm sorry, that is just not on. It's okay to protest about the club and to protest about the team, but you leave individuals alone and you leave their families alone, because it's not their issues.
Yeah, no, exactly. There's a white line that you cross, and I think supporters kind of overstep the mark sometimes as well. And yeah, I think the last thing that I would want to say in the matter before we have to talk about the game, and you're like that, oh no, do we have to? It's like, at the end of the day, everybody, they're trying their best, they're human beings, and they've got families as well. So, you know, I don't like to see that. But yeah, so let's go on to talk about the game. 4-1, as I said, to Stuttgart. And I know you only saw the second half, James, but I suppose the second half was a kind of carbon copy of the first half. And I would be interested to hear from the Stuttgart manager after that game, because part of that game was it a training match for Stuttgart.
Yeah, I mean, certainly in that sort of, was it 5 minutes or whatever it was added on at the end of the second half, it did kind of look that way. And up until they got their fourth goal, it looked like a training game. They were passing the ball, right, left, forward, and they were always finding their players. Celtic, if they tried to pass the ball, 9 times out of 10, they were passing it backwards rather than forwards, or they were going sideways and then backwards, because they just didn't have the quality on the night to really trouble the German team.
Yeah, and I mean, Celtic were the home team, but if you didn't know that, you would be mistaken, because obviously, not anyone got any kind of like pass marks tonight. Obviously, I wrote down a few notes about the game, and it was all Stuttgart. Young had a good run in the second half. Obviously, Nygren got the goal for Celtic, and believe it or not, that was 1 each at the time. That seemed like hours ago that happened, and then after that, I don't really know what happened, James. It was. I said before the game that on the show before the game that Celtic Park was, as Martin O'Neill was trying to build it into a kind of fortress again after many years, because I remember Messi coming to Parkhead and saying that, oh yeah, that's the best atmosphere I play again and all that for Barcelona. But I mean, there wasn't any atmosphere tonight. I thought the supporters were very, very flat from the word go. And but yeah, I mean, Stuttgart deserved the win, take nothing away from them,
Yeah, I mean, certainly, as I said, from what I saw in the second half, it really was only one team, and that was the German team, which, as a Celtic supporter and a fan, I find that very disappointing. But as you said, there wasn't any atmosphere. In the second half, there seemed to be big gaps in the crowd as well. Now, I don't know if it was like that from the kickoff, but obviously, the bigger the gaps are in the crowd, then it cuts away at the atmosphere. I always think back to when Martin O'Neill took over the team for the very first time, and the European nights at Celtic Park were absolutely excellent. The crowd drove the team on from the first whistle to the final whistle, and that happened regardless of whether Celtic were winning the game or losing the game or drawing the game. The crowd was 110% behind the team, and it certainly didn't look like that tonight.
Alex made a comment in the chat game, James, and because me and Ethan was on before the game. If you can't get up for the game like that, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with this group of players? And that's the thing, James, because obviously I was saying to Ethan on the pre-show, obviously it's the captain's job and Neil's job to get them up for the game. But when you sit back and say, they don't really need to say anything, because it's a big European game. It's a knockout game at home, albeit the second leg's away next week, but you would want to take that league over to Stuttgart next week, and none of them are. I'm not going to say none of them look interested, because I think that's a bit unfair. But nobody had that kind of Scott Brown,
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think across the whole season, that kind of attitude has been sort of missing. In a lot of games, I won't say in many games, but in a lot of games, there does seem to be that flatness amongst the players. Now, I'm not really sure why that is. I don't know if that's got to do with the people who were in charge of the team at various times or not, but certainly when Martin came in the first time round after Brendan Rodgers left, He really picked them up and he really had them playing well. And then, of course, that all changed and Wilfred Nancy came in and it just all completely collapsed. And it seems as if he's having a harder time the second time round to get the players back up to that sort of position of being, right, let's really go for it, I see there somebody just commented about Maida looking disinterested. And to a certain extent, I would agree with that. Possibly the same applies to Hatate. Although I did read something earlier on today where Martin O'Neill says that it's, Hatate doesn't have any kind of problems in that respect. But do you know what? I respect Martin O'Neill, but I can only go by what I see when I'm watching the games, and let's be honest, it's dead easy to talk a good game. It's much more difficult to go out there and play a good game.
Would you say, well, obviously Alex made that comment about Maida as well, but it came out in the window that basically his locker was cleared out. It was ready to maybe head to Glasgow Airport and head to Sunday or Crimes. But as soon as stories come out like that, you're thinking, well, if he's not happy, just let him go. But if they didn't want to, if they didn't want that story to come out, just keep that kind of story in-house.
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to when he was supposedly going to be leaving in the summer, and then the rug gets pulled out from under him. And that's going to be a big disappointment. But then that goes back to, the recruitment process. I mean, Kyogo left, they never replaced him. Maeda came in and did a terrific job, scored lots of goals, but it's not the position that he normally would play. And then they let
Nicholas
Kuhn go, and again, never really replaced him. Yang has come in and at times he's done really, really well, but he's still, relatively speaking, a young player. He's still got a lot to learn. And for some of the players that are playing week in, week out, I think that might be part of the problem, that they're playing too often and they're getting jaded. Now, I agree that potentially that shouldn't be a case if you're a professional footballer. You should be at peak fitness all of the time. But young players do show a lot of inconsistency. That's why in a club that's got a really big squad of players, young players flit in and out across the season and really only get extended runs if they're absolutely excelling.
I think Posca Koglu said football players aren't robots, i.e. they're human beings. They shouldn't play maybe 50 games a season.
Oh, no, I would agree with that. I mean, there is far too many games of football now. But as we know, that's all got to do with money. The World Club Championships last summer, that was just about making money. The World Cup, the European Championships, the Nations League, it's all about making money. It's not really considering what effect it has on players, both physically and mentally.
When you mentioned about the players gone there, obviously Kyogo's are very interesting one, James, because I think he scored the goal was it against Young Boys at put Celtic through. So basically, all the Celtic fans went from a high to say, yes, we've qualified, to the next day waking up and reading the papers that Kyogo's at the airport, he's away.
Yeah. As I said, it was one of those really kind of strange things, and to be honest, I never thought he should have gone to the club that he went to. If he was going to go somewhere else, he should have gone anywhere but France, in my opinion. And I think the knock-on effect is still showing. Now that he's gone to Birmingham, I mean, I've seen him coming on for Birmingham and doing really, really well, but he's trying too hard at times. And he's not getting, he's not the number one choice. Whereas when he was at Celtic, he was the number one pick every game, unless he was injured, and he wasn't injured that often.
What do you think what do you think of the Incharo up front for Celtic tonight? I thought it was okay in parts. I said to Ethan on the show, he reminds me about like Jackie Mackison a wee bit. Obviously not the same build, but the point I'm trying to get at is he's got good kind of the upper strength as well.
Yeah, it's one of those weird things that modern centre forwards tend to not always be like big, bulky, upper body types, and it's more about the kind of the ability of the player to hold the ball up, pass the ball on to somebody else. You don't really get many number nines who are like an old-fashioned number nine. They stand there in the middle, the ball gets pumped up to them, they hold it up, teammates come charging up towards them, and they lay it off. They try to sort of roll the man, get the goal, which is admirable, but sometimes you just have to think, you know what, I'm not going to get a goal here. I need to bring in other players.
Yeah, no, exactly. And obviously, Nigel got the goal tonight. Talk to me about Bernardo because he got about what was it? He got basically he came off with about 15 minutes to go. It was a bit disappointing tonight, and there was a lot of chat of him saying, "Oh yeah, he'll be a good signing for Celtic," but I think it comes down to he's not got a lot of game time, James.
No, he's had quite a few injuries since he signed full time for Celtic, and he's not been a regular starter. He's the kind of player, in my opinion, that needs to be playing week in, week out. But the competition in the middle of the park for Celtic is absolutely intense. It's very unlikely they're ever going to drop Callum McGregor. And for quite a while there, Hatate was the man, to kind of dislodge, as it were. Arnie Engels, when he came in last summer, kind of took over that mantle, and Bernardo's been kind of flitting in and out. I like Paulo Bernardo. I think he's a very good player, but I think he needs to be playing regular football, whether that's regular football here in Glasgow with Celtic or he goes somewhere else in the summer. I don't know, but he would be a loss to the team if he was to go.
I know you never saw the game in the first half really, but I think Ethan, it's one of these ones where Celtic will come out with intensity and all that, or B Celtic will goose edge into the game, and I mean edge as in they're going to take the game in spells. If you know what I mean, like 15 minutes, 20 minutes, get to half time. But it was really the opposite, James. Stuttgart came out in the front foot, and Celtic they never got their foot on the ball, and when they did, they couldn't make a pass.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things that I've noticed across the season. If teams go at Celtic, Celtic struggle a little bit to contain that and to play their natural game. When they do kind of get control of it and start to impose their game on it, then you see a completely different side to the game. But when you're playing in Europe, in my opinion, you have to, when it's the Premier League, you can kind of go hell for leather from kickoff. When you're playing in Europe, you have to kind of sit back a little bit, get a good idea of what the opposition are up to, and then, maybe hit them on the break until you can establish yourself a wee bit better.
Yeah, no, we're just getting a few comments here and nothing about football, but it's always good to see that we're into the current final, and somebody won the rugby union as well, but there you go. I don't actually know where Celtic go from here, and it could have been worse, James, because it could have been 5-1, not for VAR coming to Celtic's mercy in the second half, 4-1, it's an uphill task, but 5-1, it's going to be uphill, many hills.
I mean, to be honest, while it would be great in an ideal world that Celtic could progress in the competition, maybe get to the final or whatever, this particular season, I think it would be a great bonus if they go out of Europe and they can then concentrate on the remainder of the league and to a lesser extent the Scottish Cup. Because if you don't win the league, you don't get into the Champions League, you don't have the same kind of money. And I know I've been decrying about money, but at the end of the day, that's the driving force in football now, is the finances. I read somewhere recently about the difference between, what they get when they're in the Champions League and what they get when they're in the Europa League and what they get when they're in the Conference League. And it is night and day. Possibly that's the way it should be, because obviously the Champions League is the premier tournament. But then the clubs that are in Scotland that are likely to get into Europe are obviously Celtic, Rangers, Hearts, possibly Aberdeen, maybe Motherwell, Hibs. But the unfortunate thing is that out with Celtic and Rangers, very few of these teams progress far enough in the tournament for them to grow in a European sense. And certainly Celtic have been going backwards in Europe ever since we did that. We had that great game against Bayern Munich and we're like within a hair's breadth of taking them out of the competition. We're certainly going backwards.
Yeah, it's it's a bit like when Martin O'Neill was here the first time and he took Celtic to Seville. Celtic went backwards, and I think Porto won the Champions League in that season.
Yeah,
as well. So, I always talk about this, James, and people might be sick of me saying talking about this, but why is that an issue? I mean, it's not a kind of Celtic issue. I think it's a mentality issue, but also a Scottish football issue as well. I mean, why can't we not produce our own players? And a lot of it's got to do with money. But I mean, surely there's got to be something else,
Well, I mean, first and foremost, it is to do with money. If a team's successful, then the club should invest in that success by improving the players. So you've got a very good squad of players there and you do really well in Europe, but the next time round you want to go a bit further in Europe, so you need to bring players that have got a bit more quality. To bring in players that will give them a bit more quality, you have to spend a bit more money. And Celtic as a football club have traditionally hated spending money. They have hated it with a vengeance. And that has always been an issue for Celtic. But the players, they themselves should be looking at, can I move to the next level? We've done really well here. Next year, can I be part of a team that is going to take that extra step? And if they're honest enough with themselves, they will know that they've not really got it in them. They're not going to admit
and
it. Let's be honest.
No. Yeah. And I was just going to say to you as well, Jim, you would think that Bayern Munich was a benchmark, and this year Celtic could go maybe once get further. But again, it all comes back again to the finances.
Well, it also comes down to enticing these players to come to Scotland. Let's be honest. It's not the most attractive league in the world. I know Hearts have been doing really well this season, being top of the league and all that, and Hibs are doing well, Motherwell are doing well. But generally speaking, it's a two-horse race every year. And I mean, as a supporter, there's not many supporters want to go up to like Dingwall in the middle of winter. You know,
A Wednesday night, so,
and for some of these top players, it must be a real culture shock. Yes, you play at the likes of Celtic Park, nice stadium, good facilities, etc. To a certain extent, it's the same at Ibrox, but then you go to some of the other grounds and it's like going back into the Stone Age, and they're going to be thinking to themselves, what the hell have I done coming here? And that is not a problem, of Celtic or Rangers creation. It's just a problem of the country. In terms of our footballing nation, we haven't really grown out with Celtic and Rangers. And as I said, to a lesser extent this season, Hearts obviously are the guys that are in the driving seat. And I take my hat off to them because they've done really well. And I thought, honestly, come round about Christmas time, that's when it's all going to come falling down, round about Hearts' ear. But no, they've gone out there and they've been in games when they've been terrible. But like champions, they've found a way to win, just like Celtic have been doing, with all these last gasp winners. Not great for the heart, but, you have to keep going to whatever time the final whistle is. You have to keep going and you have to believe that you're going to get that equaliser or you're going to get that winner. You've just got to keep going. And sometimes when you watch the Celtic team, especially in Europe, they don't really seem to have that kind of grit and determination. The Bologna game apart, that night I thought they were absolutely excellent, especially considering they went down to 10 men so quickly. But over the course of the European games, they just don't really seem to have had the heart for it.
Of course, Martin will say, yes, good game, but I don't know if you saw me say, well, what's the point of being in the competition if you don't want to win it? And I think like there's a bit of turning cheek there, but also there's a bit of kind of thing, well, I'm a professional manager. It's I'm managing the team, and it's like if you've got that mentality, why be in the competition? It's a bit like the Scottish Cup. But what I was going to say, Kay, was, do you think most of the Celtic fans are annoyed how heavily they get beat tonight in the performance levels, but a drag because obviously if they beat Stuttgart over the two games, and if it was a big ask, let's be honest, James, then they can play on the Saturday, because if they were in the Europa Cup, they would have to play catch up.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, I kind of thought to myself, do you know what? It'd be really nice if Celtic could go on, maybe get to the final, maybe win the final, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if they win the Premier League then, because they get into the Champions League as the Europa League winners. So that's okay. But that's not going to happen. So the sooner they're out of the competition, and I hate myself for saying it, but the sooner they're out of the competition, the quicker they can start to concentrate on the domestic side of things. And as I said, the Scottish Cup, yeah, but really the league, that's got to be the thing. The league has to be the thing, especially if they want to really be playing in Europe next year. If they want into the Champions League, they're going to have to win the Premier League. But if they want to get into the Europa League, then they're going to have to be like in second place. The Conference League, I don't know. I can honestly say I've never watched a Conference League game since the thing was since it came into being. The Champions League I watch all the time, whether Celtic are in it or not. I really like the competition. The Europa League, I'll watch it if Celtic are playing in it, but if Celtic aren't playing in the Europa League, I'm not interested in it.
Okay, so I was asking Ethan earlier on as well, right? So where do you stand in this, like the Conference League? I know it's all about money, and it's a bit like Celtic getting out the Scottish Cup. and then get put into another cup. That's what it's like, and all that. But I would love to ask any kind of fan. Well, I'm asking you now, James. Like, if Celtic were in the Conference League, you'd be wanting to win it.
Of course
Okay,
I would.
it's about the competition, but
Yeah.
I mean, in my eyes, it's still European football, James.
Yeah, no, don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to diss the Conference League. As I said, I've never watched any of the games in it. I don't really know what the standard is like. But I would agree, if they're in the competition, I would support them in the competition. I mean, I never played professionally. I played at juniors, but I never played professionally. And I never went into a game thinking that I wasn't going to be in the winning team. Do you know what I mean? But that was my attitude. That's not necessarily the attitude of other players around about you. You know what I mean? So if you've got that never say die attitude, in my opinion, you're going to play well regardless of who you're up against. And sometimes when you're up against better players, it really lifts you.
And that's the thing, because like I was saying this earlier on as well, that players don't expect to roll up and say before they take to the park, we're going to win the day. It's like you're going to your work and say, I'm going to have a good day at work. Well, how do you know that? You've got to work hard to make it a good day, or make money for the company, or whatever. And like that should be the same as football players. It's back to the point earlier on where I can understand where Martin O'Neill gives a pep talk before the game at halftime and all that, and the captain McGregor gives it in the huddle. But when you cross that white line, James, it's up to the team, it's up to the individuals. That's why they're called a team.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with having the attitude, that you're going to win, no matter what the sport is. If you're going to be successful, you have to have that kind of attitude, right? When you're in a team game, that attitude has to become the team attitude. Everybody has to be, wanting to win that game. And I would like to think that professional football players, whatever team they play for, would think like that every time they cross the line and they're going to start playing a game. Lots of things can go wrong in a game. Decisions can go against you. If you're in the top league, VAR can completely make an arse of it, as it did on Wednesday night in the Aberdeen Motherwell Cup tie.
Spoiled the game, that.
But, these things happen. But as an individual and as a team, it is up to you to get over that, to get past that. You can't allow the disappointment to drag you backwards. You often see it when you watch a game of football, sometimes other sports, rugby and stuff like that. Teams are not doing particularly well, and you can actually see it in the body language of the players. But then they go on at halftime or whatever the case is, and they get a right good pep talk, and they come out and they're re-enthused and they're like a different team, But you have to have that attitude from the start. But that attitude has to be across the whole club. It cannot just be the players. It has to be the fans. It has to be the players. It has to be the backroom staff. It has to be the boardroom as well. They have to have that kind of attitude. For me, there are too many people in the Celtic boardroom that are quite happy to pick up their dividend check, but they're not hungry. And a lot of them are maybe not even necessarily football people, And that's the thing that, from a board level, that's the thing that has to change.
That's because for a big club like Celtic with lots of money, they're not really acting like a big club.
No. But you think about it, right? Celtic are going after a player, right? And they stick in a bid, I don't know, £6 million, right? And somebody else is interested in that player, and they go, right, we'll give you £6 million and £1 more. And Celtic will be like, oh no, we're not going an extra £1. You know, they identify players, or we assume that they identify players throughout the season that they want to bring to the club, right? So, in my opinion, what they should be doing is as soon as the transfer window opens, if they've not got the player lined up to sign at that point, they should be having them ready to sign very soon afterwards. But very often Celtic are running about at the last minute, because for whatever reason, they've hung back, they've waited, they've hoped, maybe pinned their hopes on a player who ends up going somewhere else, and they've not really had another 2 or 3, that they might be able to go to. I just think the whole thing about Celtic Football Club when it comes to recruitment of playing staff is just completely wrong, and it has been for quite a wee while. Again, I would say go back to Martin O'Neill's first stint as Celtic manager, whereas, the board really backed him, 6 million quid for Big Sutton. I remember a lot of supporters at the time thinking to themselves, oh my God, what are they spending that money on him for? Because he'd had a horrible season the season before. John Hartson, there was a lot of questions about him, about his knees, because Rangers had knocked him back because of an issue with his knee and all the rest of it. But Celtic took the gamble. Martin O'Neill wanted him. The club backed him. And as they say, the rest is history. Henrik Larsson, not a big money signing, had an absolute horrendous first game. Horrendous. And I can remember supporters saying, oh my God, what have we got here? Look where he ended up.
Yeah.
So it's not always about spending the most money on a player, but it's about getting that player wanting to play for you and getting them in quickly enough. The winter window is a completely different kettle of fish because you don't have a lot of time. But when the summer window opens, you should have, however many players it is that you're looking to buy, you should have a list of those players and you should be getting them in very, very quickly so that they've got that full pre-season to get to know their new teammates, to get to know the system, if there's a different system in play at the club. But Celtic don't seem to do that. Celtic seem to sit back and wait and wait and wait, and then they're rushing about at the last minute. Nygren's probably the only real success from the summer transfer window. And he never cost a lot of money. But he's come in with the right attitude and he's scored. Well, he is the top scorer, I believe.
Yeah.
And he's a midfielder. So, I mean, Engels, 11 million quid the year before, had a pretty good first season, was in and out of the team this season for whatever reason, seemed to be coming back onto a game, then got injured, So, I mean, it doesn't matter. You can't tell, just because you spend millions and millions on a player, doesn't guarantee that guy's going to be the top goal scorer and all that kind of stuff. It's how they adapt. And if they get brought in plenty of time, they've got time to adapt.
And it adds to Celtic worries because no matter, by the way, you should be watching this show and this show only, no other shows, but like if fans are watching Celtic podcasts or other programs on Sky or whatever, they'll be sick of the presenter and the contributor saying that Celtic needs new players. And to add to the list, James, and we said at the top of the show, I think it's Michael's Haggis day. I think Celtic will be looking for a new goalkeeper in the summer.
Well, yeah, because they will need at least 3 goalkeepers. As I said, I think Casper has come to the end of his time as a great football player. For me, I would put Sinisalo in. I think he's a fantastic keeper. He just needs to get the run in the team. For whatever reason, that's not happening. Obviously, the big name always kind of, I suppose, gets the nod. It was sort of the same thing when Joe Hart was there. He was like every week. Joe Hart was in the team. and rightly so, because if they're playing well, then they should be in the team. But if they have a dip in form, regardless of the position that they play, if there's a man there knocking on the door who could come in and do a good job, then you bring him in. And if he's not doing a good job, then you bring in somebody else that might be able to do it.
Sunday, Celtic's got a big game. Another big game. They all seem like cup finals at the moment at home against Hibs before they hit the road for like 4 games back to back as well. And I was saying earlier on that Martin and they'll get a kind of hated Aberdeen game to be off because, and in fact, Martin and they'll come out and say that the SPFL slotted in that game very, very quickly, right in the middle of going to Ibrox twice as well. But I mean, would you see Celtic making any changes on Sunday for the Hibs game?
If they do, I don't think they'll make many changes. If I'm being honest, they have to put out their strongest team. Because the Hibs are doing quite well lately. They went through a wee kind of sticky patch after a good start, but they've kind of weathered the storm, as the saying goes. So I think they will have to put in the best team that they can. A lot will depend on whether or not there's anybody suffering niggles, after tonight. I know, was it Nygren went down? I think he took a kick to the thigh, and he went down for a while. Hatate took a couple of dunts. So you don't know how players are going to be tomorrow, whether or not they've picked up an injury that might not have been evident, during the game, and the adrenaline during the game would keep them going anyway. So yeah, if anybody's picked up a little bit of an injury, then there's a chance that there will be changes. But then, if there is changes, that means that the guy that's coming in has to be at it. Do you know what I mean? Even if you've not played for a month or 2 months and you're getting an opportunity because somebody plays in the same position as you can't play, you've got to be right at it because you've got, why have you left me out? Look at what I'm doing. I should be in this team. But at the moment, a lot of the substitutes that are coming on don't seem to be doing that. I mean, I quite like Luke McCown as a player, right? Yeah. But he looked like somebody who was just running about daft when he came on to me in the second half. He didn't really seem to be that effective. It was as if the atmosphere, the occasion, the need for Celtic to kind of like get goals overtook, his ability to think about the game and, maybe play that intelligent pass rather than that fast pass.
I think for me as well that McCown is one of these players you would want to start the game with. You don't want him to come off the bench. Well, I'm saying that it depends what game and all that. Maybe you can get away with that at home, maybe not away from home, but like in a big European night like that, I would rather him start the game than come up and then come off. And then be subbed off, not the other way about.
I mean, in an ideal world, a game like tonight, it would be your most experienced European campaigners that would be starting the game. For whatever reason, that might not necessarily be able to happen. So then you should have your kind of like your reserve, if you like, who can step in and step up. Luke McCown, in terms of the Premier League, would be a terrific player week in, week out for Celtic in the Premier League. I think he still needs some time to grow into Europe. Whereas the likes of Engels, Bernardo, if he's playing, they have a bit more about them in terms of European pedigree. But obviously Engels is injured. I'm not sure how long he's going to be out for. Bernardo was injured. He's just come back.
Carter Vickers.
Well, he's going to be out for quite a while, isn't he, Carter Vickers? Yeah. What I do find interesting, actually, talking about, the defence. I'm not saying that he shouldn't be using Trusty and he shouldn't be using Scales, right? But they brought in that young lad for Brentford, right? Now, not necessarily in the European context, but he's never been near the first team, as far as I can tell. And I remember watching the boy playing for Brentford, and he's a good player. He's maybe in the league, the cup, something like that. Give him a wee run out, see how he does. Europe might be a wee bit too much for him. But obviously, if you've got a back four and it's a settled back four, then you're going to play them all the time. Araujo has really bedded himself in at right back. Sarachi, when he comes in for KT, looks very, very comfortable, and it doesn't seem to upset the rhythm of the game. So, who knows? I see somebody just popped up a note there about the Conference League, about the level of Scottish teams.
Do you agree with that, James?
At this moment in time, yes, I would agree with it. Yeah. The Conference League, definite. The Europa League, a little bit of a step up. Champions League, yeah, it's great to get into it, and it's great to, have games against the likes of Real Madrid and all the rest of it. But it is a kind of step too far. Although the new concept of the Champions League is quite good. It gives the, in inverted commas, the smaller clubs more of an opportunity to progress in that tournament. But I would think the Conference League at this moment in time is probably the level of the Scottish teams that are going to be playing in Europe.
Yeah, I mean, and I know that we're trying to talk Scottish football, maybe not tonight, obviously after that performance, but I mean, the bottom line is, James, that kind of Conference League was designed for leagues like us in Scotland. Okay, we've got an exciting league and we enjoy watching it and all the rest of it, but when we go up to European football, it's a bit like not one level, not two levels, maybe 4 levels up.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing about Europe and progression in Europe, whatever tournament it is, right, is that you want to progress. So you get into the tournament for the first time, you're not really expecting that you're going to do that well in it. But when you're in the tournament the next time, you would expect to go to the next level. Same would apply the next time you're in, you would expect to go to the next level. And that's what the Celtic supporters were thinking was going to happen after that game against Bayern Munich. And I think to a certain extent, probably Brendan Rodgers was thinking that way as well. But the board, as always, I don't know if Brendan Rodgers went to them and said, we want to buy this guy and he's going to cost us 14 million or whatever it might have been. And the board would have gone, and that would have been it. They'd have been clutching their pearls, and having heart attacks that they thought of spending money. And that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, I suppose, I know you mentioned it to me tonight, and we've mentioned it a lot of times when we chatted on the phone and all that. It comes down to money. But I think that if you want Celtic to do well, or the likes of Rangers to do well, or even Hearts to do well in the Champions League, they've got to spend big bucks.
Absolutely, they have to be able to have players that are at that quality, if you like, of being a Champions League player, whether they're at the peak of their powers or whether they're on the way down, but they've got that experience. That you need something to help you get over the hurdle and get you to the next level. And when you get to the next level, you have to look at it and say, right, what do we need to get us from here, from A to B, and how much will we have to spend? Because at the end of the day, you're never going to get a team like the Lisbon Lions, players who all came from within 30 miles of Celtic Park.
Oh, you'll never see that again.
I mean, you're never going to see that. So if you're going to go into the world market, as it were, then you have to be prepared to spend the money. Celtic, very much, Rangers as well, I suppose, Celtic are very much a selling club these days. Bring in young players, develop them, bring them in for, relatively speaking, a small amount of money, and then sell them on, for an absolute fortune.
Before we go, and this has been a good counselling session after the game tonight, but I think we touched upon the Hibs game a minute or two ago. But how does Martin O'Neill, Sean Maloney, Cam McGregor pick up the team for Sunday? And I know I said earlier on that it should be up to the individuals, because obviously they would want to win the game, But it's definitely a good play tonight.
There's two ways of looking at it, right? You could look at it and say, right, do you know what, guys? Even though we're going across to Germany next midweek, we're out of this competition. Let's concentrate on what we do have an opportunity to win in, i.e. the Premier League, the Scottish Cup, and really build yourself up for that. But you have to be aware that Hibs are a team that's on the rise again, and they're scoring goals. Celtic are not really scoring goals in that respect. We've got players who've come in, that boy Adamu, who scored on his debut with that cheeky wee back heel.
Against Dundee.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? Who knows what he's going to be like over the rest of the season? But he has to be playing. Do you know what I mean? If you're a football player, no matter the position you play in, you have to play in the game to affect the game. You can't really affect the game if you're sitting on your backside. And sometimes when you come on as a substitute, you're not coming on with enough time to affect the game. Bringing somebody on when there's 4 minutes of added time doesn't really give them a great stretch of the game to go at. Don't get me wrong, sometimes they come on and bang, they've got a goal straight away, and that's absolutely wonderful. But then the next game they're back on the bench, because you can't just say, well, do you know what, he came on at the end of that last game and he scored a goal, he's got to start this game. But we really need to start scoring goals, especially the boys that are going to be so-called centre forwards. I'm talking about Vanchara, Iheanacho, Adamu, Maida to a certain extent. If they're going to be playing that centre forward role, then they've got to be able to score goals. Yes, if they're playing wider or in the midfield, they contribute. But the guys that are meant to score goals have to start scoring goals.
There you go then, a disappointing night for Celtic in the Europa League. Finished Celtic 1, Stuttgart 4, second leg to come next week. And obviously we'll be covering that game next week as well. Maybe from behind the couch, I'm not sure. We'll be back tomorrow for the big preview show of the weekend. Big games to look forward to at the weekend, Saturday and Sunday, and also the championships heating up as well. Who will win? St Johnstone, Packet Thistle, but also there's other teams in there it could potentially come off the fence and win the league. Anyway, so that's all for tonight. Thanks to James Elliott for joining us on the show. Thanks to all your comments, and we will be back tomorrow live at 5 to preview the weekend games.
Following Celtic in the Europa Cup.